Any career you go into, acting, medicine, engineers, teachers, lawyers, you have to go through a certain levels of education. So I started asking pediatricians, different parents, and all the answers they were giving me just didn't resonate with me. If your kid pulls a toy away, be really strict with them or put them on a timeout. And those things end up leaving us parents depleted, and it leaves our kids with no tools. So I realized there was really very little information out there. So that's when I started getting into posting on social media.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I got my co-host Brian Gold here and our new friend Shirin. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. Great. I'm so excited to be here.
Happy you made it.
Thank you.
Even with, a little voice.
Yeah, without my voice.
So, how'd you get into this whole parenting thing? And
By being a parent, I assume, right? Just to
It
start with?
actually started way before I became a parent.
Really?
Without even realizing it. It started way back in undergrad. I studied fine arts, but I also studied law, and in particular criminal law. And I started working with teenagers in juvenile hall and at-risk youth who are on probation from juvenile hall. And when I started working with them, I first of all started noticing a lot of problems in the system, kids coming back, kept coming back in, or them being, very much misunderstood, or people assuming automatically that they were trying to be disobedient or bad. So from there, I wanted to help kids before they got to that point, before they were, a teenager in juvenile hall. So I decided to become a teacher, and I got my master's in education. I started by working in inner city schools.
that's a big career change.
So initially, when I was working with people with teenagers in juvenile hall, I was a university student at that time.
Okay.
Yeah. So my career I started was getting into education.
Yeah.
So I got my master's in education, started working as a teacher, and then I got married, had kids, and then I was like, wait a minute, first kid was fine, no problem. Second kid comes along, I'm like, what do I do right now when one kid wants the other kid's toy, or there's just like or one kid is throwing a tantrum. There are all these questions I had. And so I started asking pediatricians, different parents, and all the answers they were giving me just didn't resonate with me. If your kid, pulls a toy away, be really strict with them, or put them on a timeout, or get louder. And those things end up, leaving us parents depleted, and it leaves our kids with no tools. So I realized there was really very little information out there to help parents. There's no guidebook.
There's no book.
There's no guidebook. We were talking earlier, and I said that if you want to, any career you go into, acting, medicine, engineers, teachers, lawyers, you have to go through a certain levels of education. You're not just going to go, and hope that your surgeon knows what they're doing, or hope that your pilot can figure it out. But as parents, which is, I think, one of the most important jobs, that's what we're expected to do. So that's when I started getting into posting on social media. It just happened very slowly, very organically. Slowly got over my fears of being online, and it was well received because we're all hungry for the information.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like, I'd consider myself a new parent, and we're at the preschool stage and which way to go. And seeing her interact with some kids, she meshes well. Other kids push her, and then she pushes back. I'm like, well, I don't want her to get bullied, so don't be afraid to push back.
Right.
I don't know if that's right, wrong, and different, but at least she knows.
Right. Well, then there's so many of those questions that come up.
Yeah.
So I started gathering kind of just like all the knowledge I had from being a teacher, from working with kids, incarcerated youth, and also from the way, I was raised. And also started gathering a lot of information from things I was doing, wrong, that didn't feel right, and just saying okay, how can I do that in a better way? How could what's more effective in maintaining the parent-child relationship and simultaneously giving my kids tools so that they will actually improve in the future?
Yeah, my mom was a yeller. I mean, we respected her, but she was loud, quick to scream. And it seemed to be the case with a lot of my friends at the time. I was born in 81, so like the 90s kids basically, or even earlier than that, 85 to 90, where you're like in that real impressionable age before we can really just talk back. I think after like 11, 12, they can kind of pretty much make us draw a line in the sand or something. But yeah, I definitely, and I find myself reverting back to that, like automatically wanting to be loud, or, it's an immediate response of like, you know what I mean? I guess we're sponges, so we see our parents doing, and we kind of, replicate these things, whether we know better or not. But yeah, like you said, there's not like having a game plan for handling certain situations before you get into them. And I mean, people are having kids, not as young as we used to, I feel like, but in the same sense, nobody ever gave us a guidebook on a lot of things that are really important in life. Like, I feel like
Marriage, kids.
high school, we should be getting prepared for like, how do you actually manage a household financially,
Right.
spiritually, emotionally, and deal with all of these things, because we're like taking these young adults and then telling them to go do this, and then just saying, yeah, the rest of your life you just go figure that out for yourself, right? And
Right.
there's no real guidebook on it.
Nope.
Absolutely.
And then a lot of parents you see I've seen strollers like walking around, there's a cell phone holder, and the kid's just not even experiencing what they're walking around seeing.
The
Yeah.
kid watching.
Yeah, the kid.
That's screen time as a whole.
Yeah. How do you feel about that? It's dangerous, huh?
I think that if parents use screen time, I think a lot of parents think that their kid kind of needs it. The kid kind of needs to decompress. They need a little bit of that time. I think if a parent uses screen time, it's really more if the parent needs it. And if you sometimes need it, then it's totally understandable.
right?
It's a tool. Sometimes we get overwhelmed. Personally, we try to do very, very little screen time in our home. But I understand if parents do use it sometimes. If you do use it, you really have to go into it with a plan.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with screen time, one of the problems with screen time, is that we're kind of not giving our kids opportunities anymore to work through boredom. We're not giving those opportunities anymore to work through arguments, to kind of explore more of those uncomfortable moments in our lives, or like if a kid is acting out and they're just all over the place and the parent needs to cook, then and they go on the screen, the kid is getting the message like, okay, I could just be off on the side. I don't really need to be such an active member of the house. What happens when they're teenagers and the parents want them to help is all of a sudden they're like, wait, this is a message I've been getting. I've been kicked out of the kitchen.
I'm gonna go play video games. I'm gonna go be on the screen.
Right. Even if they weren't screaming, if they were a nuisance and the parents in a rush, just want to get things done. It's so much more effective, let's say, to involve the kids. It's gonna get them to stop screaming. It's gonna get them, give them something to do, and it's gonna make them be an active part of the family. So
I seen something online yesterday about raising kids the Italian way, and it was basically about them not getting a separate menu, having to be involved in dinner. Obviously, Italians are very family orientated, with everybody sitting down, oriented. My wife tells me that I say that orientated isn't a word, but it's very family oriented, and they try to include the young children in that. Like you were saying, it's asking them to help or set the table or do this, and not giving them the option for nuggets and mac and cheese and whatever else. They kind of just have to eat what everybody else is doing.
When it starts at a young age, it's just natural. They're not going to necessarily, ask
Know that
for
there's a hard stop. Yeah.
And little kids love to help. They have the energy. They have the desire. It's usually the adults that are kind of pushing them away because they're not going to do it as well as the adults.
I find when I ask my daughter to help me with something, she's much more inclined to do it versus saying, hey, can you go do that for me? But say, hey, do you want to help dad go walk the dog or go take out the trash? Okay, let's go.
Yeah, and that also brings you into like special time together. That's your also quality time together. That's a bonding. As opposed to when everyone, I mean, now a lot of times households are, everybody is in a separate room on a separate device.
Yeah. Getting a separate
Yeah,
feed.
I'm guilty of that one.
Yeah, but really, I would say one of the core ways of getting our kids to, you know, really listen to us when we need them to, is having a bond with them, having a relationship with them, and having kind of just that foundation with them, so that when we do need to kind of teach them, that they'll be more apt to listen to us. If they're sitting on a device and you're on a device and nobody really has much of a relationship, then it just turns out to our relationship nagging at them, telling them what to do, whining, complaining, directing, controlling.
It's not healthy.
It's not healthy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a relationship.
Creating a bad dynamic. It's a very dictative relationship, right?
It's losing an opportunity to really connect with our kids and to really build something. And then you also really get to know them better. The more quality time we spend with our kids, the more we understand where their actions are coming from. We'll better understand how to respond to them, what works best for our kids. It's all valuable data that we're getting just by being with each other, in addition to the bonuses of spending time, with one another.
It's a very fun process.
Listen, in this day and age, everyone's busy, right? Everyone's busy. We're all busy. So not everybody's going to have, I work with a lot of parents who are just like, they're working until really late at night. When they come home, they just want to decompress and be on their phones, which I get. But all those few hours, like between school and the parent getting home, the kid was like so excited for their parent to come home.
Yeah.
I always tell parents, you don't need a lot of time necessarily with your kids.
It's quality time.
You need quality time, which means our phones
Stays in
need
another
to be
room.
away. No nagging, no complaining, not even asking a ton of questions.
Yeah, they know from like I have a 1-year-old, so they know from a very young age that they're vying for your attention between the device and themselves, right?
Right.
Immediately they're like smacking it out of your hand because they know that you're here and not present.
Yeah. This is the first generation that we've had an actual device
Yeah.
between us and our children.
Wow.
And it's constant, or it's on our wrist, or it's
It's everywhere.
I travel a shit ton, and my daughter knows how to FaceTime. It's a blessing and a curse all at the same time. I'm like, well, I'm halfway around the world. I'd love to see her, but on the other hand,
Wait till she gets her own iPad and she can just call and learn how
that's
to
not
text them.
happening anytime soon.
That's when it gets really wild.
Yeah, I'm like,
Non-stop, back to back to back to back. It's
saw-
cute and like a
I
little
saw
bit
my
much.
wife pretty much commandeer my iPad, and then now my kid's trying to take it. I'm like, no.
Yeah. I mean, that's where, yeah, there's definitely bonuses of having it. I always say also one more part about the quality time is it should be screenless. It's like not necessarily quality time watching a movie together. It's fine to watch a movie together, but if you're actually making an effort for quality time.
Playing, drawing, whatever
Yeah.
it might be.
But, FaceTime is when it can be really beneficial. Or if you want to leave, like if your kid has a hard time transitioning every morning when you go to work and you want to make them a 1-minute video for them to see when they wake up, it could be beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
But that's different than it being kind of like our go-to with boredom, or just like calming our kids down, or, keeping a calmer household.
Yeah.
Yeah, like for me, my sleep schedule sucks, so I'll lay in bed in the morning till she wakes up, and she sleeps between us, and then she wakes up at 9, she sees my face, she climbs on top of me, gives me a hug, and goes, I want a snack. All right, let's go get a snack.
So special.
But I get grilled from some people. They're like, oh, why do you still let her sleep in the bed? Well, in the last year, I've been home 6 months.
How old is your daughter?
2.
2. I don't know any 22-year-olds who are still sleeping with her. You'll be fine. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying? Like,
that's a good
enjoy
point.
this time. I co-slept with all of my kids.
Like all of them in the same bed at the same time?
Sometimes. Yeah, sometimes. And sometimes on occasion, like maybe on like on a weekend night, sometimes we'll still do it because it's fun and it's just like a special time together.
Yeah.
My kids I had 3 kids in 3 years, so they're all close in age.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, every kid is going to learn to sleep through the night. Every kid is going to learn to sleep on their own. Every kid is going to learn to, I pushed all my kids in the stroller for naps, and
People
car
ask me
seat.
a
They'll
lot
grow out of it. It's fine.
because I have multiple kids as well, and they they ask, oh, like, at what time do you do this? At what time? It's like everybody's like on a clock of like, I have to get this done by this time, or you're behind, or, even it starts young, even at the doctors, where they're like, oh, well, this is a scale of like what needs to be happening. But like you're saying, I mean, we all adjust and learn at our own pace. And it's like, there's no like, some kids don't talk till they're 3. My little brother Dakota didn't talk till he was 3. He never said a word. And then one day he said a full sentence, and everybody looked at him like
Where the
he was the youngest in the house. And we're like, oh, the kid can talk. And he just like, but he just had no, I mean, everybody just did things for him. He had no reason to be verbal, I guess, So it's not like, and I mean, he's perfectly fine now. He didn't have any developmental issues,
Right.
even though we thought it was very strange that he was 3 years old and he wasn't talking yet. I never shut up from the time I was like 1, so my mom thought it was weird that this kid wasn't speaking, But everybody's at their own pace. There's no timeline or judgment or
Yeah.
whatever's working for you and your family should be
Oh yeah.
the focal point.
Right. And developmental milestones, in a way, it's kind of good to be aware of them, just in case you do need to have. There's amazing professionals now who can help, just to make sure that it's not a developmental issue. But I completely agree that if certain things, it feels right, if it works right for your family, and the whole world is kind of saying the opposite. For example, sleep training is a huge thing. The majority of people are doing it. It's not whatever felt right for myself or my family.
Yeah.
All my kids now sleep through the night. It's fine. They'll get there.
My 5-year-old was sleep trained. My daughter that's 7 was not. She stayed in the bed for like till she was like 3 or 4. And obviously he was like totally different because he was like sleep trained from like 9 months old, which had its advantages, obviously. I mean, you can leave. The one thing is like early on, you can have other people babysit the kids because
They're sleeping.
he goes to bed and he's not even going to wake up. You know what I mean? He's going to sleep through the night and anybody can kind of watch him. And getting him on a schedule and a program, it kind of helped with everything else. But the process of getting him to that point was like super traumatic for us as parents and him, I'm sure, as a child. It's like
Right.
Going through that intermediate time where you got to let them cry themselves out. It's like, it's
I'd have to leave the house.
It's a
There's
lot.
no chance.
Yeah, it's a lot. It was a lot, but we had professionals help us with that. But with my new daughter, we're not necessarily on that path. She's 1, she's still in the bed.
You're on the Brian path on that one.
Yeah, I embrace the fact that I get to wake up with her and have that time
So special.
bonding,
Yeah.
It's not going to last forever. I know that this goes really extremely fast.
You especially know, because you also have a 21-year-old.
Yeah, it just flies. And next thing you know, they're 5 and then they're 10 and then they're gone. And you're like, oh, wow, that was, you think it's taking forever when they're 1 to 3. And then all of a sudden time exceedingly just gets faster and faster. And you're like, damn, I wish I would have spent more time holding on to them when they were little,
Yeah. And that's one thing that can help us kind of stay calmer in the moment, actually. It takes some practice from us, but thinking ahead, like, okay, my kid is dingling on me and won't let me go to bed or won't go to bed themselves, and just thinking like, well, my kid's not going to want to sit on my lap pretty soon. Like, this might be one of the last times.
Yeah.
Kind of helps us stay calmer to get through that moment if you're not in a place to be calm with it or want it
Yeah.
that time.
What are your usual first recommendations for parents that are coming to you in certain scenarios? What do you get most often that people come for help?
There's a lot of it's just basic, like my kid's not listening, my kid's throwing a tantrum. As they get older, it gets a little bit more like, their kids are really attached to their peers and not listening at all to the parents. And I think that the foundational step for pretty much almost every situation that I hear of is rebuilding that connection between the parent and the child by doing things like 10 to 15 minutes of quality time together a day, or weekly dates, like one-on-one weekly dates, just kind of building the relationship so that you can have those opportunities to actually teach your child, who they won't want to receive it if you're always angry at them. But if you have that connection with them, they're more likely to actually listen to what the parent has to say. So I always start with really the foundational steps, giving kids a little bit of space, not always hounding down like all of our requirements. Just like give it in a given day, like think about how many things we tell our kids. Sit-ups, don't eat like that, eat quieter, don't be so loud, come here, go there. It's just, it's constantly non-stop. And then they start building like a counter will. They don't really want to listen to it anymore. So taking a little bit like of a step back. And the way to do that is to think about your non-negotiables. Pick a couple of things that are really important to you. And the rest of the stuff, be a little bit more flexible. And then with the things that are important to you, for example, my 2 non-negotiables are safety and hygiene. Hygiene is really important for me for my kids, and safety. It's not the time then to then become like the strict parent, the mean parent, I'm forcing you parent. And then it's the time to put our energy into thinking outside of the box. How can I, in a creative way, in a way that'll maintain the dignity of our relationship, teach my child or get my kid to do what they need to do?
Yeah, I like that. Hygiene obviously is very important, and safety as well. So they know bath time is and brushing teeth and stuff is important.
Yeah.
You don't bend on those, but it's a little more freedom, because you're right. We do, especially when they get into like the bigger toddler stage, and it's like constant of like, they know better, but we should still be cutting them a little slack. So it's a little overbearing,
Yeah. I would say like, you'd say like the terrible twos or three-nagers.
I think that it almost skips. Well, my new daughter is 1, and she's a handful, so she'll probably be like, the 2s will probably be a little rougher. My son was like easy as hell, and it's, I think now in the 4 and the 5s where he's kind of like caught an attitude a little bit and been going to school. He was the sweetest little boy, and now he's like, you hear a lot of bros and like a little when you tell him to do something, and I'm like, oh, okay. He used to be like, yes, Papa, or
for better or for worse, they learn things. For better or for worse, they learn things from school.
What did she say? My wife said, Chance, he was playing a video game one day, and it was like a Monster Jam game, and he wanted to do a donut, and he couldn't do it, but she couldn't do it either. And she said, so fast, I went from like being like the love of his life to, you're trash, bro. And that's what he told her, because she couldn't figure out how to do a donut. I was like, oh my gosh, this kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes by fast.
But also like those years that are considered like teenager years, 3-nagers and terrible twos, like all those like kind of have like the typical stereotype for being a little tougher.
Yeah.
It's because they're in transitional stages of their lives.
Yeah.
Right. They're moving out of either, and the toddlers are moving out of that baby stage where we can just do everything for them. And they're like, okay, put on my clothes, choose my clothes, tell me what to eat, put it in my mouth. And they want to be big kids. And teenagers are moving out of that kid stage. They're not really ready to be adults, but they're both transitioning. So it's a little bit tougher for the kid to go through it, and for also the parents to give a little bit more space and figure out how to walk them through it.
Yeah, I'm adjusting with my 21-year-old now too.
True.
She's still learning how to not be a kid. She still thinks she's a kid. And I mean, she is, I guess.
She is.
Yeah. She's always going to be yours.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be as difficult as people make it out to seem.
For which part?
Just the
parenting?
Yeah, the terrible twos, the teens. Like you said, you have to have your non-negotiables.
You have to have your non-negotiables. Look, parenting is hard. I think the hardest part about parenting, my personal, is working on ourselves to constantly, try to be quiet, try to be calm and try to think outside of the box. And we see really a lot of our own flaws, our own impatience, our own tempers, and working through all of that. When we have tools and when we're prepared, it helps it go more smoothly. I wouldn't say it's necessarily easy for everyone, but it makes us feel better at the end of the night. We don't feel depleted for when we get angry. It makes us feel like we're actually giving our kids tools, like we're actually helping them. And we know what to do in the moment. I was telling Brian earlier, I was like, there's no parenting instinct for how to handle a kid yelling in your face, I hate you. There's no parenting instinct for how to handle like one kid hitting another kid.
Yeah.
She'll hit me and I'm like,
There's no, right.
what do you, I'm just like, I just say,
What are you
"Ah."
supposed to do in that moment?
I'm just
right?
like, hey, you don't want to hit other people.
Right.
I'm like,
But when you're prepared with tools for that, then we're less reactive, and we could help guide our kids for, okay, through practice, not doing it anymore, handling it in a better way.
yeah, I let her abuse me a little too much.
She's gonna get stronger.
Those kicks hurt, especially when they're in the head and they sleep sideways.
Oh,
They're
that's
all-
accidental.
Yeah.
Sleep kicks don't count.
Oh no, she'll be awake and do it and think it's
Okay.
hilarious.
She's running the show over there for sure.
Dude, she stands on my head and just starts laughing. I'm like, okay.
Let's talk about your programs a little bit. I know you have some different types of bundles of parenting help.
I have online digital courses for parents. I do have them individually, but I always recommend them as a bundle because everything's connected and I want parents to have access to it all. So I have online digital courses on improving behavior, on resolving sibling rivalry, and on managing meltdowns. And they're all things that people can watch from their home, with their partner if they have one, at their own pace. And they're really, really short but impactful videos because parents are busy. No one's going to sit there and watch 3 hours of content. But if I say I have 10 to 15 minutes right now, I have 10 to 15 minutes of tools that are really, really going to help your family, then you're going to be like, okay, I'll watch that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
It's a good timeline.
Yeah, anything longer than that when, you're pulling your hair out with your kid and all
Right.
that fun stuff. It's like, I'm not gonna sit there for an hour and then
Right.
I'm gonna get distracted with this with the kid or work.
And it's just too much. It's just too much overload of information. So it's all broken down into little topics, into little segments. And then there's printable guides for parents who, some people are better learners when they write things down and also read it alongside of it. But I really wanted it accessible to parents globally. I wanted it accessible to people that could watch it from anywhere at any time. Because there is not that, like we were saying earlier, there is no guidebook out there that really, a lot of the advice that's given out there is nice in theory, like, be nice to your kids or be calm at bedtime or like have quality time together. But how do you actually do that in practical terms? And that's what I wanted to transfer over to parents, is like the real practical tools.
Like I also like your comparison videos that you do on Instagram of with your daughter doing it, the traditional way everybody's used to and then flipping it to your way, seeing the different reaction.
And it really makes a big difference. A lot of people think like, oh, well, that's fine on an Instagram video, but in real life, my kid would never. But like, I've had parents that be like, well, what happens when you try? And they've tried it and they're like, oh, it actually worked. And then I did it again and it actually worked again.
So it's not just your daughter.
It's not just my kids.
These are
Not,
kids.
yeah, I have 2 girls and a boy, and it helps. And not every one thing works for every single kid. Of course, every kid is different and every parent is also different. You're not going to want to do every tool that I'm suggesting. You don't have to. That's why there's a ton of tools to choose from, to see what works best for your family. But always leading with connection, it works. It takes more patience.
Yes.
It definitely takes more patience. We're kind of we're in the microwave generation.
Yeah.
We want everything fast. We want to put our food in 30 seconds later. We want to be eating it. And that's why punishing kids is so, it just seems like such an ideal way of, not ideal, but it's just like people think it's effective because they temporarily and quickly see results. But what's actually happening is you might get your kids to be quiet in the moment. You might get them to stop a particular, thing that they're doing by sending them to their room alone, or whatever your punishment is. But in the long run, they're left feeling victimized, angrier. They're not gaining any tool set. They're not going to want to learn from you. They're angry. And so they're left with no tools. And so then it goes on repeat. And so when they're really little, you can give them a little punishment, a little consequence, or like raise your voice a little bit. But what happens as they get older and older and they get louder and they get stronger is that either it won't work anymore. I mean, either you need to get louder, you need to get stronger, your consequences and punishments need to get tougher. And then they start doing that also in turn. At some point, you can't carry your kid and toss him in a room, lock him in a room. At some point, that's not going to work. So the goal is, by the time they get to the teenage years, is not to be so strong with people. Think that I'm going to be so tough with them when they're young that they're going to respect me when they're older. They're going to be so tough with them when they're younger. They're going to be out of there the second they can. They're just going to be gone. There's going to be not much relationship left. It's going to be a lot harder to gain that relationship back. As opposed to if we spend all these years trying to lead through connection and education and giving them tools and practice, hopefully then by the teenagers, they'll have a tool set that they can use, and we'll still have our relationship with them, a solid relationship with them.
Yeah, I see a lot of, obviously they're little sponges, and as you intensify the yelling or the people that choose physical punishments or whatever it is, I see that kids tend to, you see kids that hit other kids and get physical or use these same tools that their parents are using with them when they're not happy in a situation at school or somewhere else, that they're like, it's pretty obvious where that's coming from. If my kids come home and tell me that somebody tried to push them or hit them or something, and it's like, okay, well, this is obviously something that he's used to or she's used to in their environment, and now that's what we're teaching them, right? Is that this is how you solve these issues when you don't like something that somebody's doing, instead of having a more diplomatic.
It could be that those kids are being hit by their parents, but kids who aren't hit also hit.
100%. I'm not going to put that on everybody, but
right, because they have so many emotions in their tiny little bodies.
Yeah.
And they don't have all the sophisticated tools that it takes to label their emotion, figuring out what's bothering them, and then to be able to calm down enough to communicate it in a healthy way. So so they just let it out in their bodies. Mm-hmm. But over time, absolutely, over time, those kids who are letting it out with hitting can learn to do it in a different way if they're being taught. Otherwise, it will go into their adulthood.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How do you feel about pods for schooling?
School pods?
Yeah.
I think that if that works for your family, great. I mean, if you're able to give your kid a solid education, good teachers, I think that there's a lot of benefits to both. And there's no necessarily right way. There's not, some parents can homeschool, some parents could, just individually, that you could do pods, you could go to traditional schools. There's definitely benefits to all of it. Benefits to a pod is that it might be more of an individualized, intimate educational system. And no matter what, of course, it's important to still have that social aspect, which you can even get if you're homeschooling one-on-one. There's a lot of outside classes and opportunities as well.
A lot of school is socializing skills, right?
I think most of school
is programming of like
socializing skills, yeah. Especially in the
nap at the same time, we eat at the same time. Well, I was telling him, because we had the pod conversation, and I was saying that like in preschool, they kind of, it's easier for them to be defiant by themselves with their parents than it is like, okay, I'm separated now. Now we know that our teacher is
in charge,
our leader here, and the little tribe kind of follows in line. Even the ones that aren't as sped up, it's kind of like nobody wants to be the kid that's not following or drawing in the lines in a lot of those scenarios. So they kind of like keep up with the pack and kind of learn to follow along with the teacher's leadership. No,
it depends. More so maybe with younger kids.
Yeah.
I'll step in really quickly and say that it's not even I wouldn't even use the word defiant. Mm-hmm. I think that kids are really comfortable to be themselves with their parents, and so they can kind of let out a lot of their feelings and thoughts and emotions more comfortably with their parents, and that's actually a good thing. Doesn't feel so good to the parent, but it's actually great because it's an opportunity to teach our kids in the safety of our homes. A lot of it also can bleed into the classroom as well, once kids are more comfortable with their teachers, but yeah, a lot of times they're more comfortable with their parents. As kids get older, and this is a lot of where bullying kind of might come in. If kids don't have a stable adult presence in their life, a relationship in their life that they can kind of cling on to and ask for guidance from, and just an adult that they're really attached to, then they're going to start attaching to each other. So instead of learning from an adult who's wiser from them and being able to grow that way, they're going to just be kind of trying to learn from their peers. And that's never, that's dangerous. That's dangerous when you get to that point. And so that's where a lot of times you might see kids who aren't really attached to a safe adult veering off and being really kind of like the black sheep leader of the classroom. And these days, it's not necessarily seen as a bad thing amongst peers. Unfortunately, in a lot of schools, the one who isn't doing their homework, the one who's being mean, in a lot of schools, those are the more popular, the bullies now are a lot of times the popular ones, and the other kids are kind of just like following them because they don't have necessarily another person to follow.
Yeah.
I mean, they do, but not one that they're attached to in the same way as their friends, as their peers.
Mm-hmm.
Then I see the good and the bad to the pods as well throughout time.
What do you see as, let's say, a negative?
Honestly, not that much. Especially if you got 6 kids together and, they're getting the socialization, plus they're doing the other classes, soccer, whatever the heck you put your kid in. Maybe just not as used to like big group settings. Classrooms of 30 versus classrooms of 6, but then you're getting the individualized attention and you're actually going through it a hell of a lot faster like you did when you were going through school because you were doing it one-on-one.
Were you homeschooled?
For off and on, and then I was on set like predominantly most of the time. So, I mean, I wouldn't consider it real schooling, but in a certain sense, my grasp of self-learning and everything else is way accelerated than most people at a young age because I was around a bunch of creative, successful people that treated me as a peer and not as a child from a young age,
Right.
So it's a different education. But also, yeah, like he's saying, even in the homeschool, which was like very new back then,
right,
and only focused on the industry itself probably, I was able to like fly through stuff. Obviously, because I wanted to get through it as well, and I'm a fast like self-learner. But yeah, I mean, I can go through weeks of work and hours, you know what I mean, and like get through courses
right,
and things of that. But
do you feel more self-motivated because of it?
I mean, now I know that it was because I know I can teach myself how to do anything, and this is before YouTube, where kids really have the access to teach themselves anything now.
And adults, right?
Yeah, this was just from reading books and different things, but that was also from like being one-on-one with like, social workers, because they'd have to be on set. We'd have to do 2 or 3 hours a day. I forget what the time limit is while you were working anyway. But it was definitely an accelerated one-on-one path. And obviously these people that chose this line of work aren't dealing with 30 kids in a classroom. They're dealing with like 1 or 2 or 3.
Right.
And are probably, in a better position to focus on that. Maybe their job is a little bit more cut and dry because it's a little bit of a better situation. Yeah, of course.
Less time disciplining.
Yeah. It had its benefit, I'm sure. It also, I missed out on a lot of normal childhood milestones as well because I didn't have that normal.
Well, you were working.
I didn't have the normal upbringing.
Right.
I didn't have class trips or proms or dances or these things. Like I was out of school by the time I was 16. So it's a give or take. But yeah, things are different now too.
Yeah.
Back then that was very, very, very rare. It wasn't a normal case.
Right. I think since COVID, a lot of people, before COVID, I think homeschooling had a really bad rap.
100%.
The kid's going to be awkward. People thought that the child might be socially awkward.
Yeah.
But since COVID, I think a lot of parents were like, heard what was happening on Zoom or saw that there was another way to get their kids educated. And they're like, oh, actually, they like it and they see the benefits of it. So it's really what works for your family.
And you get to monitor as a parent a little more.
How do you feel about it? Did you do Zoom Zoom
During
school
COVID?
COVID with the kids?
So
What was that
no,
process?
I during COVID, I stopped. I couldn't. I was like, I'm not going to have my kids. My kids were young,
Oh, okay.
and I used to be a teacher, so I'll start by doing that. I had the opportunity to do it. I didn't want my kids behind the screen all day. And they just also, it was hard for them too. For young kids, it was really, really, I think it was hard for all kids, but really hard especially for young kids. So I think after about a week or something, I pulled them off and I homeschooled them myself, for about a year and a half. And then they started, and then when they went, to school,
Yeah.
and then they started school.
Yeah, my wife is a kindergarten teacher as well. So that was her background before. And obviously with that, it makes you feel more comfortable, like knowing that the basics are going to be, she knows how to get through that with teaching them how to read and lesson planning for ABCs and 1, 2, 3s and
Right.
basic arithmetic and stuff of that nature.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much the core elements of civilization
Right.
as I look at it, and then you get into other things later on in history and that type of stuff, literature.
Oh yeah. Well, obviously that comes a little later, but start sprinkling it in here and there.
Yeah.
So are your kids
My kids are in school.
in school?
Yeah. My 5-year-old is in kindergarten at a private school. He went to preschool there his whole life. My daughter went to preschool there as well and did kindergarten there. And then now she's in Woodland Hills CES, which is a good public school here in town. And we left Chance in the kindergarten at Discovery because my daughter was obviously extremely advanced for going into the public school system in Los Angeles from being in preschool and private kindergarten. She was a lot ahead of a lot of people because of that. They had been going to school since they were 2. They're just used to that program of like,
Right.
I get dropped off and I get picked up, and this is part of the deal, and we know this. So when kindergarten came, they were pretty well advanced. But my daughter's really into it, and she was like really into doing schoolwork, and you see, naturally you see this with females a lot of times. And then my son, we were kind of worried about him because he's like didn't want to do any of that or write or do anything. He just wasn't into it. But this year so far, I just got a report back from his kindergarten teacher, and he's super bright and can handle all of it and process it all. So we were a little worried, but he just wasn't interested in
He
it.
wasn't ready, or a lot of it comes down to like just their teacher also, or
The
their readiness and
environment,
their
whatever.
teacher. Yeah. I don't think there's one right answer. I think it depends
No.
on your kid
Yeah.
and just what works best for your family.
Yeah, and I also don't think any of us were designed to sit in a box for 8 hours.
We're not. That's definitely true. That's why I get so upset when I see like,
As an educator, go ahead. But as an educator, you've obviously seen this, and you've dealt with troubled kids and things, and now you're a parent. And this is a thing that obviously we're taking our kids from the time they're young, and we're dropping them off with somebody else, and we're going to do our day-to-day things that we have to do to survive in life, and then picking them back up and not really knowing what's going on in these scenarios, or what's being led or taught, or who.
right. I mean, that's one
We hear a
reason.
lot of good stories, right?
Right. I mean, that's one, you said you do or don't hear a good story.
I mean, we hear a lot of bad stories mostly, not so much of the
The special great moments.
Yeah,
There's a
exactly.
lot of incredible teachers out there.
Mhm.
And there's also teachers out there who, are tired and exhausted and meant well, but they're on overload. And so as a parent, it's really important to be our children's advocates. If your child, if your kid is the one who's like making, everyone laugh in class and is being loud and is up and about, and their teacher wants to put them, take their recess time away. I'm a strong proponent of like, you need to go and speak with the teacher and say, my kid, that's the kid who needs their recess time the most. Don't take it away from them, right?
Yeah.
So we need to go and approach the teacher from like not an attack point of view, like, what are you doing? My kid needs this. But like, you and I both want my kid and all the kids to have the most successful year possible. You know, I would like to think of ways together to do that. I know that my kid, you know, being kind of on the same team, trying to figure out a goal. Like my kid really needs, let's say, that time, that recess time, or kind of just the more also that the teacher hears that the parent is involved, you know, they're more likely to think twice before certain things.
Yes.
And I mean, I really believe that most teachers have a good intention, and they went into this field because they're like loving, caring people who have, you know, really like kids. But then the reality sets in, like I was saying, overload, exhaustion, or just also teachers also are given a lot of really bad advice. You know, reward charts, I think, should not exist. Punishments, I think, should not exist. When I was a teacher, I never punished any of my students. I also never rewarded any of my students, because then you have the opportunity to start building intrinsic motivation.
What about grading and scaling and these things? Like,
So you don't really have a choice. I mean, undergrad, I went to UC Santa Cruz, so I didn't actually have grades then. And I saw the benefits of, I was like, wow, when I didn't have the pressure of getting a good grade, I was like, wow, I actually really love learning. So, you know, in the traditional school system, you don't really have that option.
why is that? Is it because it's rewarded based off of merit, or the system
I mean, the system itself, there's standardized tests, and then you go into high school, and from high school you get into college, and it's just kind of,
It's a program.
I don't really know the history of it. That's just the way it's developed over time. But as parents, we can do what we can. For example, if your young kid is coming home with 3 hours of homework a night and doesn't have any time to play and explore and be creative, I always recommend go talk to the teacher. See where there's a little bit of flexibility. Even though it's a structured system, we have more influence on it than we might think.
Yeah.
You're making me like the pod a little more.
Yeah. I mean,
Listen, every classroom, I've had great experiences with my kids' teachers. I've just seen a lot of what's out there. When I was in my grad program at UCLA, we would go into a lot of different inner city schools, and we would observe classrooms, and we weren't allowed to say anything. And there were so many horrible things that I saw. For example, a teacher who put their 6-year-old to stand on a tile facing a wall. And this is like the teacher's doing it in front of us.
yeah, they didn't.
I can't even imagine what's going on when there's not an audience.
Yeah.
Or another teacher who, like, there was a student who's, you know, fidgety, and the teacher, a third grader, made this third grader sit on her hands during the duration of the class. Like, okay, no, you give the student a fidget toy, or the student can't sit down, allow the student to stand and work, or allow them to chew gum. I mean, there's different things that teachers can do that don't have to resort to those types of, like, you know, disciplining, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. A little barbaric.
I wouldn't say, there was also, again, amazing teachers. It's not typically necessarily what happens, but I already saw it.
I've seen
in
it
several
myself.
classrooms.
Going
Right.
to private school, going to public school. I saw it all.
All right.
Some teachers were great. Other teachers didn't want you to grow, and
Or they didn't have the skill set, just like a lot of us parents don't go into it having, you know.
We need to be involved. If we send our children off to somewhere expecting somebody else to, we're very entitled as a culture, in American culture in general. Like, we feel like we're entitled to certain things, and that these people are supposed to do their job in the system, and if they're not doing it well, we're complaining about it, but we're not actively being involved in the situation. Obviously, we're the biggest teachers in our household, so without our input, regardless of where they're going off to or not, we're kind of not setting them up for success, right? Not
Yeah, if
actively
you're not being their
participant.
advocate, you're saying,
Yeah.
right? We need to be their advocate, a participant.
Yeah.
And these days, a lot of times the teachers are spending more time with our kids than
Than we are.
parents are.
Oh yeah.
So really working together to see how to make, you know, what's most successful for your kid.
saw some stat, and I don't remember it exactly, but pretty much teachers are raising our kids, or help is raising our kids, and we're not really raising them
Right.
anymore. And it's whatever values that teacher or nanny or whoever it might be that's watching your kid is getting pushed onto your kid, and it's not coming from you.
Right.
So if you're not involved on the school level of what the curriculum is, how the teacher's teaching it, then you just got to pray that whatever they're teaching works. But that obviously isn't the solution.
No, I mean, we really, spending time with our kids or being there, Mary, it's not like, it's not a luxury. It's kind of like we have to do it. Like there's, parenting is not it's not convenient.
No.
It's just not. We need to make it work. We need to figure out a way. Of course, people are working and real life happens, but that's why the practical tools come in that make it so like, okay, even in real life, this is how I can have a successful relationship and ways of raising my kid. And by the way, you could try a pod. You could try a pod for a year and see how you like it. And if you want, you can continue on the next year. It doesn't have to be a lifetime commitment.
Oh yeah.
Whatever we
6
decide
months
as
into
parents.
it, I can pull the plug and say, all right, this doesn't work.
Right.
Let's go try a regular school.
I mean, I think for basic preschool, kindergarten areas, it's going to be perfectly fine. It's whether or not you can provide engaged, active curriculum later on where it's a little more demanding on its pace, It's not,
It's finding the happy medium.
yeah, I mean,
We also want kids who could like think for themselves and be
Yeah.
creative and
And I think I was in special ed from 6th grade through first year of college. And I remember 9th grade English class, the teacher looks at us and there's like 9 students in the class. She goes, I'm teaching you all to work for somebody else. Everybody stayed quiet minus my dumb ass. I was like, fuck you, I'm going to go build something. Well, that resulted in me in the principal's office.
oh, she meant that? I thought there was some like
Oh, no,
twist to
no,
what
no,
she
no, no.
was
She
saying.
flat out said that. And I just
Wow.
said, fuck you, no. And I ended up in the principal's office, and the principal's like, I'm going to call your father. Perfect person to call. Call him. Tell him to come in. He lives 4 minutes down the road. My dad comes in. The fuck you doing teaching a student, let alone a special ed student, that they have to work for somebody else? That's what you're going to program in their head? And that's when it kind of clicked in my head of, I'm going to kind of do it my way over the years. And I became successful, and I didn't work for anybody else.
How come you were, if you don't mind me asking, in special ed? Like, why did they
Dyslexic.
think?
Nothing major, but they shoved me in there, and
I mean, was that even the right place? I mean, or are there other?
I think I needed just more hand holding more than anything.
Right.
And I would say 90% of the class was exactly same thing. They needed just more hand holding. And then, you got ostracized for being in those classes because everybody knew that was special ed class for whatever curriculum you were learning that day.
well, I think she was being honest with you, though.
But it's unfortunate. That was the unfortunate plan.
But I mean, they kind of are training,
They are
kind of
training.
what they're training.
Yeah,
on,
and that's kind of,
Not that there's anything bad with working for someone,
No.
but just kind of saying like, it sounded more like she's telling you, I'm going to teach you how to be like
No, she took
a diligent robot, like an obedient robot.
That's it. Yeah.
well, no, she flat out said like, hey, you guys aren't going to work for anybody. You're not going to work for yourself. You're going to end up working for someone, and you need to follow these rules. And it was a quick lecture, and I don't take shit, and my mouth usually gets me into more trouble, but
That ended up being a step toward your success, actually, it sounds like.
yeah, and that's kind of why I go on the fence about the pod and the school and just my own experiences going through special ed, going through private school, getting kicked out of private school and got my sister banned with me. Because another teacher just drove me nuts and just talking shit, and I talked shit back at a very prestigious private school, and it didn't go very well. It's like, cool, I didn't want to go there anyways. Public school, let's go.
Yeah.
That probably didn't go over well at home.
My dad
He was happy
Actually-
to save tuition money.
was on my side for that one.
Was he?
I wrote a very nice letter to the teacher at 6th grade or some shit, and looked at my mom and said, she started it. I just finished it.
Oh, you did the Kevin Hart? My mama told me to tell you.
Oh, I don't even. I'd have to ask my mom for like the full story, but
That
I'm
guy
just like,
said that.
I don't know. I just getting involved on that level because my parents only got involved once I got into shit. It wasn't finding out the beforehand.
That's the point.
And I got into a lot of fights. I got into a lot of shit with teachers. I just didn't want to be there, and I was rebelling for multiple reasons. And they weren't involved. And even once they stepped in a little bit, all right, teacher left me alone, or I moved schools or moved classes, whatever the heck it might be. But that wasn't the real solution. It should have been prevented long before I got to that point.
Right. That's the point, because that's what it comes down to a lot for younger kids, and even as you were saying, as teenagers, is that a lot of times adults step in when it's bad, when it's hard, when they want to, when they're upset about something. And kids need their attention cup filled daily. If we're not filling it with a bunch of positive attention and connection, then they will go for the negative attention. I'm not even saying you were doing it for negative attention or not, but once they step in just for the negative attention, there's no connection there. There's no foundation for them to actually want to listen to the parent. And so that's what we need to try to avoid, is to step in before it gets to that point.
Yeah.
Step in when things are also good or even just neutral, and to be a presence.
And just be aware of,
And,
hey, when are you checking in with your kid on what they learned in school?
yeah.
All the stuff going on in the world that we won't discuss. Just, are you staying involved? Are you okay with the curriculum? What changed in the last week at your school? Whatever it might be, whatever your views are, does it align with your core values?
And so there's certain moments throughout the day where we're more likely to get information from our kids.
Yeah, they're gonna tell you not. This is a big thing because my wife, even in preschool and kindergarten, would, before she sent the kids home, she would remind them of everything they did today, because regardless of whether they were a participant in it or not, when they get in the car, they just tell you, I don't know, we did stuff.
Well, what are the parents asking? How was your day? Very
Yeah.
general questions.
Yeah.
How was your day?
It was good.
What
Did
you have
do?
a good day?
Yeah. What did you do?
Right, but
It's
it's
kind of, they're kids.
Right.
They tend to like,
right.
I add this, and then you see a picture of like, he held a shark today or something like later on the website, and you're like, that's all you told me? You told me you did this,
Right.
and you forgot to tell me that there was a snake at school,
Right.
and
You forgot those
and
minor
played
details.
with
Yeah.
that they tend to be like.
Right. And there's ways of bridging that
Yeah.
gap. Like some kids just love to talk, but for a lot of the kids who come home and are quiet, I mean, give them their after school snack, give them their time to decompress a little bit, and then ask specific questions. Like, did any, like we'll have a game in our dinner table called Who Here? And it really keeps our kids involved at dinner. And it's like, who here, painted with watercolors today? Who here ran a race today? Who here helped a friend today? Who here answered a question or got upset today? All of these things. And then you just ask these specific questions, then that leads to conversation. The other time of the day that kids are really more inclined to open up is bedtime. But what happens at bedtime is that everyone's exhausted. Parents are tense. Kids want connection. Parents want to be left alone and go to sleep, or want their kids to go to sleep so the parents can have a little time. So it's also really important to have like ways to keep things calm around bedtime, so it could flow more easily, because that's the time of day where kids really start opening up. When you have a calmer time at night and their body relaxes, they're like, oh, mom, this person was so mean to me, or this happened with my teacher. And so really setting up like you were talking about, our kids for success, really setting up a situation an environment where our kids can be calmer and we can be calmer, also helps with communication and just kind of learning more about their life. And our kids aren't going to know necessarily how they're feeling or know what triggered them. The more time we spend with them, the more we're able to figure those things out as well.
Yeah. Like one topic came up last week discussing with other parents of setting up a pod. Let's start at 8 a.m. I laughed. I was like, I don't get out of bed before 8 a.m. I was like, how about 9:30 or 10? They're like, well, that doesn't work. I'm like, then I'll figure out another solution, because I'm not rolling out of bed that early. I don't want to hear noise at that hour. Like, I want to wake up at my pace.
In his defense, the pod's at his house, so that's why he was not wanting the 8 a.m. thing.
Yeah, I'm like,
Oh, yeah, you're
I
out.
told him too. I said, bro, you got to start at like a decent hour.
9:30 to 12.
But I get that though. Yeah.
Plus, Madison, like the other night, she sacked out at 12:45. That's what time she wanted to, she got all hyped up with grandma and then didn't want to wind it down. And then finally, 12:45, she's exhausted.
Like AM?
Yes.
I was so passed out before that. Well, because if kids don't sleep at a kind of like an earlier bedtime, their cortisol levels spike and they get their second
Yeah,
wind.
normally she's
It's
out
harder to fall asleep.
by 9 and she goes 9 to 9.
We had that circadian rhythm talk yesterday with our hormone doctor, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Mine's just,
Yeah, his is all over the place. So.
I'm special.
Yeah,
Wait,
but
so how old is how old are but you have more than one? Oh, just one.
Mhm.
Okay, so you haven't started school yet.
no.
We're on the discussions of figuring it out.
Yeah.
Preschools are a little different too, like Jones was saying.
Yeah.
Like
It's a little more drop off pickup. I think even at the first they pick up at 12:30 anyway. So
but they're
it's really
also
just a
smaller
2 hour.
classes, like
Yeah.
one teacher per 6 kids, I think typically, and it's kind of like a pod in a way.
It is kind of.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Discovery where the kids went to school? You've never been, huh?
Mm-mm.
So in the main hall before they get separated into classrooms, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's probably 7 different little pods that they're in with their 1 or 2 teachers. And they're all like kind of in like a main hall where they have like curtains separating them almost, So it's a really good like little program where they might see a friend that's in a different class than them, but like that they know from elsewhere or whatever, but they still have their own little space and community. They are kind of like little pods in a sense. That's pretty
That's
much
what it
they
kind
are.
of sounds like.
They are. They're just, it's set up with a whole bunch of little pods in a room basically, and they kind of do their own things with their, obviously different caretakers are different caretakers. They have different
Right.
Methods
traits and methods and programs, but they all kind of have a similar get them on the structure of, we get in, we settle, we learn, we have an activity, we do lunch, we go outside and play, we do like it's just the basics of this is the flow of our day to get through it.
Right.
Then we take a nap. Nap's important at those things. Is she napping?
Hour and a half to 2 hours.
Same time though, or
Depends on what Michelle did that day.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's important that you get like some type of
Semi-routine.
you have to have like some
So important for kids.
We have I know she's up 8:30 to 9. That's the only routine I know
Yeah.
about. And then I
It's
usually out
important
the
to
house
get the nap
shortly
times right and the eating at the same times type of thing because
Avoid
these are the
challenge.
structures they're getting into.
Yeah.
And it also helps them from being extremely anxious because they don't know what's coming next.
Right.
And so they don't know what to be prepared for in those situations because you're not setting them up for, oh, okay, I know I get up. I know we have breakfast normally. I know. When you see like really calm households, you tend to see that their routines are like
Yeah.
set like in
Well,
stone,
like
agree.
7 p.m. dinner.
They
or
do the same thing
yeah.
over and over. It's because, school is the same. Unfortunately, the prison system is treated the same way. The military treats things the same way. They get people on a routine because it brings structure and calmness, and everybody knows to
does,
kind of
yeah.
follow along the path.
But with kids, it also, I think structure also helps them be a little bit more autonomous. If they're independent, if they wake up and they know what's coming next, they're able to do that next step. I
Yes.
think there's a lot of actually benefits to it. As long as there's some flexibility within the rigidity, so they're not scared. There's so many benefits of having routine and structure that avoids so many unnecessary tantrums, like from being hangry or exhausted. And
They end up on a flow of like in the natural pace of their day. They know what to expect. They know when something's coming, and it helps. It makes it easier on us as parents as well.
Then she knows when to wind it down and all that other fun stuff.
Yeah, being able to put Chance at bed at 7 and then now 8, like clockwork every night. My kids don't argue with me when they go to bed.
right, it makes it so much more
They go
peaceful.
take a shower, and after they eat, and they go to their room and they go to bed, and that's it.
Right.
And there is no real argument about it or nothing. He might oh, I wanted to finish watching funny videos or I wanted to do this. But for the most part, he knows that, what time is it? You know what time it is. It's bedtime. And they just kind of go off and do their thing, you know? So, yeah, I mean, maybe sitting down and starting a schedule,
That would be my
some
other.
type of
That would be more my other department, but
nap, lunch, bath.
yeah, I do bath time. That's usually like 7:30.
Yeah, yeah. With the sleep training, they would cue you even as like, so when the professionals like give you a program for that, that's all scheduled too. So they do dinner, they do bath time, they read a book, and you put them down. And that's what starts that like separation of that thing. And it's that list of things one after another that prepares their body and knowing that, okay, this is safe time, this is quality time of reading, this is time for me to
Right.
go to bed.
Right. Even for me, who I never, like I mentioned, I didn't do sleep training. Schedule is huge.
Yeah.
Like I'm very much into schedule, and really helps the parents and it helps the kids.
Yeah. Well,
Definitely.
for those listening out here, that one good step is we've seen that scheduling probably is a
Even
a
outside
key.
of like the sleep training, just having a constant schedule. Breakfast is at this time, lunch is at this time.
yeah, it helps. It helps a lot.
Oh yeah, kids will know if they're on a schedule before they can even read time. They'll be like, "I'm hungry," and they'll see look at the clock. I'm like, "Oh, it's their snack time. It's their dinner time."
Yeah, they know. Humans are like creatures of habit anyway. We see that we do and rotate to the same things usually. So
Oh yeah, it doesn't matter what time zone I'm on. I'm usually like hitting each meal same time when I'm here.
yeah. Is there anything that we missed that you want to share with some parents and people out there that need that you know?
I think one of really important thing for us parents to keep in mind is that we all know that perfection doesn't exist, except in parenting. If we do something wrong, we all feel like, wrong. We all feel horrible. We feel like horrible parents. We feel guilty. And I think it's really important for us as parents, both toward ourselves and toward our kids, it's just to really be mindful that we're all going for improvement. We're not going for perfection, and everything we're doing is just steps toward improvement. And change doesn't have to be big. It's like little daily things that we do that actually really do make a big impact on our parenting, on our relationship, on with our kids.
And where can everybody find all of the bundle program material?
So my course bundles are on my website, which is NÜVÜ It's NUVU. NÜVÜ is NÜVÜ parenting.com. And I also have a ton of content on social media at Shirin.Galili. Maybe you can spell it for them.
I'll
It'll
link
be
it.
right down.
I'll link it down below.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm also
on
really
TikTok
excited.
as well, or just Instagram.
I'm also on TikTok.
Yeah.
I'm mostly on Instagram.
It's a longer form.
I started a YouTube page like 2 weeks ago, so
Okay.
just getting started there.
Yeah.
And they're like, you'll see, they're like 30-second videos and like with tools that are really, really helpful.
Awesome.
So everything I do is just try to be practical, and I'm really accessible. I love when parents email me or reach out or DM me or
Yeah. Well, if you're having trouble out there, or you just want to, get some tools that you can use to make the day easier and to have a better connection with your kids, then, we'll point them in your direction for sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was great
Thank you for
talking
coming
with
on.
you both.
Yeah, no, it's a blessing, and we love having this. We're both parents, and we love having this dialogue because it helps us as well. I mean, a lot of this show is to help us grow as people. So we appreciate your time and you sharing your story, and we have some things to think about in our own home.
Oh yeah.
So thank you for your time. We appreciate you.
Appreciate
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, guys.
Like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you next time, guys.